As an experiment, I took a couple of clients that had been long-term with me that I had a good relationship with that I could say, look, I don't know that much about it. I'm investigating some research, but I think this could be really good with your emotional eating. And we plotted time for 4 of them for the month of August to use CBD ahead of time. So before they left the office, if they were emotional eaters at night, right after they put their kids to bed, to sort of preempt those binge eating moments. All 4 clients had a complete turnaround in their health and behavior when they were using CBD.
Welcome to the Secrets of Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ken Keis. Well, today's episode is around one of the most important topics that applies to every single person listening, and that is wellness and health. Brooke Alpert is the author of the Sugar Detox, as well as she's been on Dr. Oz, Good Morning America, just about every show she has been on at one time or another, and hails out of New York. So we discuss her book, but we also discuss her husband's illness, which was debilitating, and that really got her involved with another industry. And I will let you listen or read the show notes to find out what that's about. Now, in the meantime, one of the things that we do discuss is we don't mention a lot on the shows, but CRG has the Stress Indicator and Health Planner, our wellness and stress assessment. It has 120 questions, and so we're going to have a link in the show notes. It also has a detailed, what we call health planner, so you have strategies that come out of it. And so it's been recently revised, and as some of you know, I have a diploma in nutrition and genetics. And so that all of that has been combined into giving you a benchmarking tool to identify in 5 categories your stress levels. And some of those include interpersonal stress, work stress, time stress, lifestyle stress, both from a recreational and activity point of view and nutritional point of view, which Brooke and I discussed. So we thank you as always for being a listener. If you like what we're doing, please pass it on, share it with everybody out there. It's what's interesting in these shows is that when listeners share or make a comment or rate the show, it just gets ranked higher. So it's very much appreciated, whatever platform you're listening on, that you were able to potentially do that with and for us. And then finally, if you are a professional developer and you want, or an individual who just wants to go to the next level, I'm just encouraged that you would consider our 3-day certification. We had just, I don't know when you're going to be listening to the show, but we just recently held another one. And of course, we have them on a regular basis. But, the comments at the end of the event, which are somewhat humbling, is that this is the best workshop that they have ever attended, ever. And so we say, whoa, and even words like profound, and because we get into the tools and resources. So if you're a consultant, leader, coach, trainer, just consider potentially participating and find out more from us at some level or another so that you have the information you need to decide if you want to join us. So thank you again for being a Secrets of Success listener. Here's our show with Brooke. Welcome to the Secrets of Success podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ken Keis. Well, as you know, health and wellness is one of the topics we cover, and today's guest is going to really share her personal story, her passion around it, and how she got involved with it through really the dynamics of having a family member being unable to be treated through normal sort of processes or medicine or wellness or if we just talk about the healthcare system in general. So welcome to the show, Brooke Alpert.
Thanks so much for having me.
Now, Brooke, you're kind of famous because you've been on Dr. Oz, you've been on Good Morning America, you've been on the Today Show. So congratulations on all that traction. So obviously you have a message that people want to hear.
It's true. I've done a lot of press over the last 15 years. And I have to say, getting to speak to the masses is so incredibly rewarding.
Well, we've already had sort of an off-air quick discussion, and so individuals that are listeners, Secrets of Success listeners, you're going to enjoy Brooke today. I've already made that determination, Brooke, that you're going to be awesome. So as part of this, Brooke, we like to get to know people before they were famous or before your expertise. I mean, you've authored the book, The Sugar Detox, Lose the Sugar, Lose the Weight, Look and Feel Great, and so we'll get to that, as well as your work around CBD. And so some people say, well, what's that? Well, we'll answer that here in a minute. So where's like Brooke from? Like, what's your story growing up? And where were you born? Those kinds of things, and just sort of your family of origin.
Oh, I love this direction we're going in. Well, I was raised outside of New York, out in Long Island. Very traditional family growing up. I have two really, really supportive parents who, I guess they'll let me fall, but they just sort of believe that I can just keep going. And I think it's just instilled a real entrepreneur thought process in me that I'm really grateful for. And then I was a competitive equestrian all through my childhood and through college.
A jumper or cross country?
Yeah, I was a show jumper, so I traveled all over. In high school, I had a special schedule, so I don't have to be in school half the day, so that the rest of the time I could be with my horses and training. So, it was a really beautiful childhood,
wow.
I have to say.
I've never had a show jumper on. Now, just to clarify, audience, Brooke wasn't doing the jumping. The horse was. She was just riding the horse.
I just hung on for dear life.
Of course. I grew up on a dairy farm, so I have a little agricultural background on that side of things. So interesting in that. So then show jumping and having a special arrangement in high school so you could get away. How'd that occur?
I needed more hours at the barn, and homeschooling wasn't really an option at the time. So we were just able to arrange that for my last 2 years of high school. My last 3 periods were always free. So I could leave the campus really early and go to my horses and get to training. So it worked out well, and it kept me out of a lot of trouble. So I think there's a lot of pros in having your kids very involved in sports, not necessarily as involved as I was, but just in general. I think it keeps you focused and out of the riffraff.
Well, if you think about it, I grew up on a dairy farm with chores aren't an option. It wasn't like, well, I don't feel like going to the game today, or I can't play. No, the horses need to be fed. And
exactly.
So those things are requirements. So I suspect that it developed some kind of discipline.
It did. And, teenagers are inherently selfish, right? That's sort of the age to be selfish. And I really couldn't be because I had live animals dependent on me. So I think it really was a great lesson to learn young.
So high school, wrap it up. Then what did you do for college and university?
So I went to college in Baltimore. I went to a very small school, but so I could continue riding for school. And I was a psychology major. And I graduated college, and my first job out of college was actually working for Vogue magazine. And I was at Vogue and at Condé Nast, which is the big mega giant publisher that runs all of the big fashion magazines, for a couple of years before I decided that I needed to sort of find a different direction for a future for myself. And that's
How did that work out with your horses? Did they actually have stables on campus?
So I no longer had my own horses, but the college I went to, I would get basically a project horse every year. And I'd have a horse that I'd be helping train while competing for our team. So it was an intercollegiate team that I was part of, and we traveled, and it was great to be part of a team after all those years of really competing individually.
Who knew? Wow.
Yeah.
Is that fairly prevalent throughout the U.S., where some of these teams are around and some of the colleges then?
It's specific colleges that have it. I wouldn't say every school has it, because you also need the facilities and space for it. But there's a bunch of colleges that you'd be surprised that have it.
Cool. So what did you do with your horses once you headed to Vogue?
So my horses stayed at school. By then, none of them were officially mine. They were just sort of given to me by the school to work with, and then they were still, the property of my college. And then I truly haven't been actively on a horse ever since then. So moving to New York City, it's a different lifestyle once I came here. So my riding days were pretty behind me.
It was sort of when you think about, your involvement with show jumping, what do you think were some of the things you learned from that discipline that would benefit the audience today?
I think what's most interesting is now that I am a mom of 2 kids myself and supporting my daughters through their sports, I'm finding that a lot of other parents are shocked at how dedicated my family already is to my oldest daughter's sport. But for me, it was really how I was raised, that you find a passion and you go for it. And that these are the rules. These are the times you have to be there early mornings, or just that, the early mornings. It's not a punishment or a prison sentence. This is what you do to achieve your goal. And I think that having horseback riding, which was such an intense discipline to follow, of early mornings and long days and responsibility, I think it's set me up for parenting pretty well. But also, I think as a founder of 2 startup companies, I think that it's really prepared me to what putting in the time and that discipline looks like. So a lot of the startup world for me has not been a shock to the system, because it was really very much how I was raised, and that dedication to whatever you choose to commit to.
Well, I can concur with that, being on a dairy farm and being responsible for chores. The cows didn't go away morning and night because you weren't feeling good. You went with it. So what's the sport that your daughter's involved with?
My oldest daughter is a figure skater, so a little different than riding, but falling is still part of both of them.
Of course.
We both fell down a lot, yeah.
And, skating being big as part of our cultures here, a lot of discipline into confirming, or not confirming, but really developing the skills in that space for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, college, finished. What were you doing at Vogue magazine?
So I was in the editorial department, and I was the assistant to the beauty director, was my first job. So it's very much the lifestyle of the movie The Devil Wears Prada, and really supporting the beauty director. And I had my own pages and articles that I got to work on and write. And it was a really fun way to get introduced to New York City as an adult. Growing up outside the city, this was very familiar to me. But working in such an environment where social lives were intertwined with work so much, and your nightlife, was part of the job requirement. It was a great way to spend the first couple of years of adulthood in the city, for sure. So then what happened after Vogue, or where did that go? So while I was at Vogue, I had gone to see a dietitian because I was not feeling very well, probably the lifestyle change from college to working and long hours and stress, and I just didn't feel great. And I remember sitting with this dietitian, and I looked at her, I was like, wait, this is what you get to do every day? And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, wait, you get to talk about food and recipes and exercise. I'm like, this is amazing. How do I get this job? And I was very inspired. So while I was at Teen Vogue at the time, I applied to go to graduate school, and I started taking night classes while I was still working, because I was afraid after 3 or 4 years out of the school environment about going back to school. I thought, maybe it was I feel insecure or too cool for school, or would I be the oldest one in the classroom? I didn't know what to expect. So I thought by taking 1 or 2 evening classes while I was still working would be sort of a great introduction to going back to school. And I was really lucky to get into NYU's program because it's an incredible nutrition program. And after a year, I quit my job and I went back to school full time to become a registered dietitian and get my master's in science. Cool. So that's what you finished with. And now where do you think this passion around nutrition and food came from? Because you're this horse girl. Sorry, equestrian. Horse girl is fine. No insult there at all. Well, I'm messing with you. I mean, hosts have to keep the listeners interested, right? So where do you think this passion for nutrition and lifestyle came from? I think it was actually always there. It was just never spelled out for me. I think if I had gone to a job fair while I was in college and dietitian or nutritionist with a private practice was one of the options, it would have sparked a connection for me. I didn't know this existed. And I've always been a foodie. I've always been very focused on how food makes me feel as an athlete growing up. I've always been interested in how to optimize feeling better and vitamins and supplements. And even from a young age, I was interested. So it all, it's like the stars aligned once I realized that was also a career. Mm-hmm. And it made perfect sense once it hit me. I mean, and who knows, maybe if my college had a nutrition program, it wouldn't have worked or I wouldn't have enjoyed it. Maybe I needed to be at the age that I was when it all hit me. But it just made total sense once I realized.
Let's go back a second. You went to see this nutritionist for your own benefit. What did that do to you when you started to follow what she was recommending, or at least observing, or did you observe some of her recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I was paying, a decent amount of money. I was going to follow whatever she told me.
Pay and do nothing.
We're not paid a lot in those jobs then, in my assistant job. So every penny was important. But I just felt different. And I think the coolest thing for me was that I felt really empowered. I think walking for a lot of people, and even myself back then, walking through a supermarket and trying to figure out what's healthy can be really daunting, or choosing from a menu. Wait, this has protein, but wait, should I not eat this? It was sometimes the options could be overwhelming, the decision fatigue. And I think all of a sudden I was like, right, I can eat the foods I like and still feel really good. I just need to make some smarter choices, or perhaps not eat so late at night because I was working long hours. And small changes for me had a massive overhaul on how I felt, my digestive system, my energy levels, my skin, everything. It's really amazing that it was a surprise to me that changing the way you're eating would change the way you feel.
Oh,
but
shocker.
It did.
Oh, shocker.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we think about our populations. We have a wellness and stress assessment, Brooke, that our company produces and people take. And it does still amaze me that many people are really not linking their condition in life based on their lifestyle and their sort of nutritional habits. They just don't link the two, or won't take personal responsibility for it.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. And I think I was aware. I just think that perhaps working in the beauty industry, and I was editing articles on diet, that there was so much information for me that I sort of just needed to figure out one language to follow, and how to weed out a lot of the nonsense.
For sure.
And I think a lot of that has basically been the motivation for my media work, because I want to help be part of the solution instead of just adding more noise to the system.
So I'll have a personal story that will link back to your book here in a moment. What did you do after you graduated? So now you have your master's degree, you're focusing on nutrition. Where did you go from there?
So right away I launched a private practice. I had a vision the entire time that I was in graduate school for 4 years of what my practice would look like. And I wanted a private practice. I was trained to do clinical work in a hospital, but I just wasn't interested in that. I wanted to work one-on-one in an office, basically helping people learn to make healthier choices. And when I graduated and passed the RD exam, it was at a time in my life where my husband and I, we were living together. We weren't yet married. We were about to get married in 4 months. And we had no major bills besides rent, right? So we didn't have a mortgage. We didn't have kids. We had no major responsibilities besides ourselves. And we looked at each other, and he was basically like, if you want to go on this journey, now's the time where your income is not as important to sort of become a startup. And right away, I started a private practice. And my first office, I shared with some psychologist that I was allowed to rent from 2 days a week, but I had to wheel my giant scale in and out of the closet because he didn't want his patients seeing my scale. So I was like a hidden secret, it felt like, in this office, which was really funny. And I started going to the office and I had no clients. And I would sit there and create handouts and concepts and ideas, and I was constantly working until finally I got one referral from someone I knew, and then it snowballed. And eventually I was able to move out of this office and I bought my own space and my practice really built up. But it's really funny. I started a practice with nobody, with no one coming.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that. Now, not to date you, but when did that occur? What year was that?
That was about 15 years ago when I started my practice.
Well, what that means is that you have experience, Brooke.
Yes.
Now, is the police officer behind you, are they coming to get you? Is that what that sound is?
This is quiet for New York City. This is as quiet as it gets here. This is like a lullaby for my kids.
Yeah, I've been there more than once, and Blue Bloods is probably one of my favorite shows, since Tom Selleck and I look alike.
Well, there you go.
I'm only a foot shorter than he is. So that being said, I'm dating this show for sure. If you're listening to this in 2040, I think Tom is gone. He's not on the show anymore.
We'll miss you, Tom.
So you're doing this nutritional work. Where did the book get birthed out of, the Sugar Detox?
So the Sugar Detox was actually my second book that I wrote. My first book was shortly after having my first daughter. I wrote Healthy Eating for Pregnancy, which was a really great introduction to the book world and the publishing world as an author. And then the Sugar Detox was next, and I had met a dermatologist at an event that we were both speaking at, and we just hit it off. And we started talking about fun ideas to work together. And then it just sort of snowballed into this idea of writing this book together about how sugar can damage not only your waistline, but it can also prematurely age you. And we co-wrote this together, and it was an amazing, amazing experience. And I think, in all honesty, I think the Sugar Detox was like a year or two ahead of its time. People still, when we first launched, were not willing to admit that sugar was truly the enemy. Mm-hmm. And then about a year after we launched, some of the big names, like Mark Hyman and others, all came out with sugar books. But I'm really proud of the work that we did with the Sugar Detox. I think it was, really on the cusp of the beginning of the change of the way we thought of food back then. So it was a really great experience writing that book.
For sure. Now, we're going to get into the book in a moment, but my personal story, and I apologize, Secrets of Success listeners, you've heard this story before, but in 1988, I was misdiagnosed as manic depressive and put on lithium. And it was really an assistance, Brooke, of a friend of mine, a psychologist out of El Paso, Texas, Sharon, who said, listen, I don't think you're depressed. I think there's something else. So at my own insistence, I demanded that the doctor do a glucose tolerance test and found out that I was an extreme hypoglycemic. And wow. So I was medicating myself with a gallon of Coke a day back then. And so it was interesting. The doctor never occurred to him that maybe my diet was leading to this situation. And after going on lithium for about a week or two, I was ready to kill somebody because my system didn't need it. And I was just angry, and just irritable to an unfathomable kind of level. So I'm with you around the sugar side because a lot of times people are not looking at their diet. So if we think about the Sugar Detox, and we know that sugar can be as addictive as cocaine, what are some of the things you're teaching people? Yet we still have sugar prevalent all around us and hidden in our foods. What are you teaching, and what can we teach the audience today for them, to start on maybe a new path of freedom and be able to treat themselves healthier?
I think well, that's a fascinating story, by the way. I've never heard of something like that, and I am blown away. And thank goodness for this friend to really motivate you to get tested, because who knows what direction that could have gone in. I think when it comes to sugar, compared to when the Sugar Detox first came out, it's less shocking to people to realize that sugar is still the enemy, yet people are still surprised where they find sugar or where I tell them that there's sugar. The first step I tell most people is to stop adding sugar to things. So if you add sweetener to your coffee, if you add honey to your yogurt, maple syrup on your pancakes, little things like that, which might sound small, but it's a habit and a lifestyle choice when you constantly are sweetening things up.
Oh, hang on. I'm gonna interrupt the expert, Brooke.
Go for it.
You said maple syrup. Isn't that healthy for you?
What's healthy about maple syrup?
Well, that's what they say, and I don't know who they is, but
I'm being the
devil's advocate versus processed white sugar or honey, which has certain enzymes that everybody says that, okay, this is great for me.
Right, so there's better options than plain white granulated sugar, for sure. And does maple syrup perhaps have some micronutrients? Is it from nature? Sure, but does it still cause your blood sugar to go up? Can it still be a contributing factor to type 2 diabetes, to weight gain, to insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and more? Of course, it's an added sugar.
Mm. So what are some of the surprising, and thanks, Brooke, in playing with the host here, is listeners who've listened to our show for a long time, my job is to advocate on behalf of the listeners. So what are the questions that they want to ask the guest right now? Mm-hmm. And so when we think about sugar, so, a lot of people say, I'm going to have honey and maple syrup. What are some of the places where sugar is hidden that a lot of people don't think about that they need to kind of consider?
So anytime that you see something that has a label claiming to be fat-free is normally a sneaky way of saying high in sugar. Because when something needs to be stored or be a preservative or last on a shelf, have some sort of shelf life, fat or sugar are two of the biggest preservatives that the companies use. So if there's not fat, in order for things to be shelf stable, there's going to need to be a lot of sugar. So a lot of the salad dressings that claim to be fat-free are often super high in sugar, right? Tomato sauces, little things like that. So it doesn't even have to be foods that are sweet, but anything labeled fat-free often is high in sugar. And then a lot of those packaged things like salad dressings, tomato sauce, marinades, all of that is just pouring sugar on top of what could be a really healthy option.
If people look at the label, Brooke, on processed meats, a lot of them have hidden corn syrup. Mm-hmm. So explain to the audience why corn syrup is not good for us.
Well, the number one reason is because it's a sugar, right? And when you're injecting sugar into your body, you're going to be having sugar issues. And the higher your blood glucose levels go, your blood sugar levels go, the more insulin your body needs to release to tell that sugar where to go. And the more frequently that we're releasing the insulin, it's like sort of yelling at your kids. It becomes less and less effective. And that's when we become insulin resistant. And that's where you become concerned about metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes and more. So all of that sugar, whether it's corn syrup or not, isn't good for you. In addition, when it comes to the corn, like the refined corn sugars, whether it's high fructose corn syrup or just corn syrup itself, is really where it comes from and the sort of extra impact it'll have on your body. So, for people who are trying to avoid GMOs or certain pesticides that are relatively scary, most of the time high fructose corn syrup really hits those two targets pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. And so when we think about, and thank you for that, a lot of us can be addicted to these different foods. And of course, if you think about Robert's movie, The Skinny on Obesity, from the University of California, and just how many foods, 20, 30,000 are invented every year. And they're not really foods, they're just processed stuff. How can I, if I'm a listener, how can I start weaning out and start breaking these habits? Because a lot of this food is meant to be addictive. So how would you coach me? I'm now your client. I'm sitting in front of you. What are the steps you want me to take?
The first step after we're no longer adding sugar to things, right? So you're not sweetening your coffee, your teas, your drinks as much. The first step is to just read the ingredients. The nutrition label is really deceiving and confusing. but everyone knows how to read sugar. So look at the ingredients in the foods that you're purchasing with some sort of ingredient label. And in the top 5, it should never be sugar. But if it's not a sweet option, there shouldn't be sugar in the ingredient list to begin with. It's not necessary. So that's what's really important, is to start looking at all the foods that we use regularly and see how much sugar is in the ingredient list.
And then anything after that the listeners could think about. So I'm going to look at the list. I'm going to stop adding sugar. For some people listening, so, oh, yeah, that's going to happen. Yes, but be disciplined. You're worth it. So the next one is look at that label. What would be maybe a third thing that I could consider?
Then the third thing is to start going for the more naturally low in sugar foods. So making sure that your plate is filled with good quality protein, good quality greens and vegetables, really reducing the amount of refined carbohydrates. So the rice, the flour, the pasta, the white potatoes. Let's really reduce those. So once a day in total out of all of them. And then fruit, well, no one's ever had to come sit on my couch because of eating fruit. What fruit can do, because it is a natural form of sugar, it can sometimes trigger sugar cravings in people, or it could sort of help you with that plateau. So I normally ask people to limit to 1 to 2 servings of fruit a day, especially when they're trying to work on their sugar cravings.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, for the audience, I know people have listened to health shows from us. I had Dr. Tom O'Brien on, and he was amazing. Can you explain to the audience what metabolic disorder is?
Sure. So anytime that we do something that throws off our hormonal system, you can sort of have a cascading effect through the rest of your body. And metabolic syndrome is one of them. So it's really when your body isn't functioning at the level that it needs to, whether because you're insulin resistant, whether because you're having high levels of ghrelin, which is hormones that make you hungry due to lack of sleep or the foods that you're eating. It could be due to a lot of different reasons, but it's when you look at your whole lifestyle package, so it's your sleep, your food, and your movement, those 3 main things, there's bigger reactions than just the number on the scale. And it's your hormonal reactions that then will cause health issues or health solutions.
Of course. And I just encourage the audience members to pay attention to this, because the 5 most unhealthiest countries in the world is North America, is like Mexico, U.S., Canada, U.K., and Australia. So we're kind of a trifecta in North America. We get all 3 of us win as being the poorest health countries. So with that, any final thought about sort of nutrition and health before we go to your husband's story? And just that journey there and what happened with your advocacy on that side of things. But now I'm listening to you, you're coaching me. Any other sort of final thoughts about my wellness so that I can be healthier, right after listening to this show?
I think that a lot of people can take more of their health responsibilities into their own hands. And that can mean a lot of different things for different people. But what I'm referring to is sort of being your own nutritionist. And it's a really interesting experience to do something as simple as keeping a food diary and writing down everything you eat and what time you eat, and then sort of putting together how you're feeling. So if you're someone who's struggling with fatigue or headaches or digestive issues, just getting some sort of quick method of writing headaches gone, headaches on a scale of 1 to 10, whatever works for you. But keeping that food diary, I think, is the best tool that anybody can use, because then you can see, all right, well, I haven't lost any weight in the last 2 weeks. Let me really take a look at my food diary. And you know what? I didn't realize I had a lot of cocktails that week, or I had a lot of more starches than I planned on. Or for me, I'll keep a food diary every so often if I'm feeling perhaps a little fatigued or some of my jeans are feeling a little tight. And that's when I realize that I start eating too much fruit. It's healthy. I'm cutting it up for my kids, and I'm just popping a couple of extra bites in my mouth, and I'm just sometimes not aware. So I think something as simple as a food diary, which doesn't cost you anything besides a couple of minutes a day, is the best tool that anyone can use when they're trying to get a handle on their health. And then if they need some more support, they're already coming to a doctor or a dietitian with so much information and more knowledge about what works in their body so that they can have a more effective appointments with their healthcare practitioner.
Now, I don't want to get politically incorrect, Brooke, but and I have many friends who are a few friends who are doctors, but a lot of cases, medical doctors really don't go down this route. I mean, you talked about Mark and functional medicine, and he's an MD and sick and then getting better. Why is we still have a lot of medical practitioners or doctors that really don't focus on this side of things for their clients, and what does that mean, maybe?
I think a lot of it is the education that they're getting. They're doing the best they can with the information they have, which is why I think it's really important to go in there with the tools to be like, look, every time I eat lactose, I get stomach aches. Or every time I'm eating these kind of foods is when I have my migraines. So you might have to connect the dots for them, but then it should be pretty validating for them to say, look, then you need to do an elimination diet. Let's take this out. And even if they're not able to validate you the way you need to be, you're already so many steps forward by sort of being able to pinpoint some of your own triggers and issues. That either you can find yourself a different doctor or a healthcare practitioner, or just continue to sort of work with yourself and fine-tune what makes you feel best.
So I appreciate that. So, Brooke, thank you for just that information of us thinking about it. I mean, it makes common sense. Most people listening to this, they get it. Yet it's not necessarily common practice. I mean, it's an interesting concept. You're a parent, I'm a parent. My kids are a little bit older now. They're going to be 25 and 24 this year. But it's interesting as parents. I said, if you do a really good job, we'll go get you a treat. What's the treat usually? Some kind of sugary product. So it's almost like we have this counterculture where the reward is this thing that can slowly kill you. And I'm being dramatic, but do you get what I'm saying there, Brooke?
I do. And I tell a lot of my clients who are parents and struggling that, for the most part, dessert should never be a reward, or food should never be a reward, because it's nourishment. Yet I'm the one that comes to pick up my kids every day, and that's when they have their cookies. Like for us, dessert happens right after school, so it's not after dinner, so it's not sugar before bed. So a lot of the parents are like laughing because I'm the one showing up with like giant chocolate chip cookies for my kids to split. But that's what works for us, and I also don't want anything to be on a pedestal that if they go to a friend's house and they see cookies that they get too excited and can't control themselves. So I think exposure is really important, but figure out what works for you. My kids don't get dessert after any other meal besides, after school. So that's what works for us, and other people can be the same, or, you can find your own plan that works. But I think that having dessert as a reward versus like the experience of going to a really cool bakery or something like that, which would be a different story, because there's like a life experience happening there. It is not a great setup for your kids' relationship with food.
Well, thank you, Brooke, for that area. We can always coach ourselves around it. A lot of cultural pressures with the sugary treats around us, and of course every corner store has it too. Now with that, Brooke, share with the audience, we have about 10, 12 minutes left. Share with us your story about your husband's situation with his autoimmune disease, and then led you down this new path with CBD. And some people will know what it is, some people won't. But just take us a little bit on this journey with your husband's situation, and then what that drove you to.
Sure. So while I was, building my successful private practice and helping everybody else feel better, my husband and father of my kids was actually feeling worse and worse. And shortly after the birth of our first daughter, he was diagnosed with this autoimmune disease and was given every treatment under the sun, from chemotherapy to steroids to some other invasive treatments and alternative testing and treatment for him. And he was just getting worse. And so the more research I did, I found a lot of connection to a lot of his issues with certain diets. So I put him on the paleo diet. He had tiny bit improvement, but not enough to sustain it. I put him on the Walls protocol by this incredible Dr. Terry Walls, who basically has come up with a protocol for helping people put their MS into remission, and she is a rock star in my world. And so since my husband's symptoms are very similar to MS, I put him on this diet. And near the end of it, the guy was eating like liver and cabbage for the majority of his meals. And the fact that he stayed married to me is kind of impressive. So I'll always owe him for putting up with me during this. But I was just desperate to help the father of my children feel better. You know, someone that I love, it hurts seeing them not feel well. So it was pretty much after the birth of our second daughter, he said to me, no more diets. I just want to live a normal life. I know I'm in pain, but just sort of be my wife and not my practitioner anymore. And I still joke to this day that I wish he could have asked for a divorce and I would have been more comfortable than not being able to help him with his diet. But I understood. So while I was not helping him, I was still secretly researching. And around this time, I had kept finding articles about CBD and pain. And I knew nothing about CBD other than the fact that it was derived from industrial hemp. And my only experience with hemp was hemp seeds. So my only experience with pot was in college. So I basically found some more research, and I found a brand that I could recommend to him. And I said, look, I don't know much about this. Eat whatever you want. It's derived from pot. Just give it a shot. And my husband is what we call cannabis friendly, which is a very polite term for pothead. And he was totally fine saying yes to this. And it was about a month of him actively using CBD. And we took our oldest daughter out to learn how to ride a bike, which any parent knows is physical, even for the healthiest ones of us. And that was the first time that my husband was able to stand on his feet for longer than 10 minutes in about 5 years. And at first we're like, maybe he's just excited because this is such a moment in parenting. And yet, he wasn't just standing, the guy was running with my daughter on the bike, and it was shocking. And afterwards, he could hardly walk home, and he needed to recover, but that was the most he'd been able to push himself in years. And the only difference was the CBD. And that's what made me really need to take a good look into the research. And the more I learned about CBD, it was the more inspired I got. And so I started learning about CBD and anxiety. And for a lot of my clients, they struggle with emotional eating. So as an experiment, I took a couple of clients that had been long-term with me that I had a good relationship with that I could say, look, I don't know that much about it. I'm investigating some research, but I think this could be really good with your emotional eating. And we plotted time for 4 of them for the month of August to use CBD ahead of time. So before they left the office, if they were emotional eaters at night, right after they put their kids to bed, to sort of preempt those binge eating moments. All 4 clients had a complete turnaround in their health and behavior when they were using CBD. And it blew my mind enough that I said, that's it, I need to go back and learn everything I can. And so I enrolled in this online program to become a cannabis practitioner. And the more I learned about cannabis and CBD, the more I realized that I couldn't find the right product for my clients and for myself. There's really cool products out there for my husband who's clinically really ill. There's great products out there for people who just sort of want to try it once and chew a gummy. But there wasn't any products that really felt like they were targeting the wellness market. And people who, like myself, feel good but just always are looking for ways to optimize their days. And that was the majority of my clients as well. And that's where I did what every entrepreneur thinks to do. Well, if I can't find it, I'm going to make it myself. And that's how Daily Habit was born.
And of course, for people listening, that's dailyhabitcbd.com. And we'll mention that again. So
thank you.
Now that's a whole nother story, which we probably don't have enough time to go into, but let's briefly kind of go in it. Let's just start another business because you want to. How did that unfold as far as being able to even create your own product. And there's science behind it. There's source products behind it. There's manufacturing. There's all these things. Just maybe briefly take us through some of those things that you went through.
I had some really interesting experience in the past with working with companies and consulting for brands and other vitamin companies. So I had a bit more of a behind the scenes point of view than I think someone just starting from scratch would. And I think what was great were a lot of my contacts. So I started asking a lot of questions from people who I trusted. And each person would then introduce me to somebody else who could answer more questions. And, between a couple of my contacts and a couple of their introductions, I was able to find a facility who could manufacture it for me. I could find a formulator who I trusted. And then we started finding the suppliers. And because of my education now with cannabis, I was able to have criteria. So it was really easy to narrow down exactly what I was looking for. And to have this really strict criteria, while it made it more challenging in other ways, it made it super easy just to, weed away the companies that weren't going to be right for us to work with.
Pardon the pun, weed away?
Exactly. That was intentional. I'm going to take full credit for that one. Thank you.
Well done, Brooke. Well done. So what was the criteria you wanted in your product that wasn't available elsewhere?
I wanted it to be a powder. I wanted it to feel more wellness than the tinctures on the market, which feel much more like, or pills, which feel clinical and for people who are sick. I wanted it to feel well and wellness. And so I wanted a powder. I needed it to be full spectrum, which means that you have not only the CBD, but you have all the other awesome components of the plant, which all work together to make CBD more effective. I wanted it grown in the U.S. I wanted it organically grown, and I wanted to be able to trace all of our steps and be able to see the farm that our plants were grown in. I wanted real transparency.
Can you, for the benefit of the members or audience listeners, what is CBD really? So just take us through what is this product. And of course, for listeners, we're not talking about TH where people are going out and getting high. Most people don't realize the cannabis plant has all, or hemp plant has all these possibilities as far as the miracle plant. But what is CBD actually? What is it?
Sure. So CBD stands for cannabinoid, and it's a compound that's found both in the hemp plant and the cannabis plant. Now, the main difference between those two plants, while they look alike and they have pretty much 90% of all the same components, the main difference is the amount of THC, which is what gets you stoned. So industrial hemp, which is where the CBD that most of us are working with, and that's what Daily Habit CBD is made from, has all of the cool components of cannabis, but has very, very minimal, if any, levels of THC. So my product will not get you stoned, high, or give you the munchies. And yet it has, there's well over 100 compounds in these plants that are known for their health properties. And so the science is showing that when you consume it all together, that it's more effective than just isolating one strain out. So just taking a CBD isolate, which would just be like taking vitamin C, out of a food, which can be good for you. But more effective is when you take like that multivitamin and they can all work together. And that's how I like to look at all of the cannabinoids that are found in the hemp plants. And so for us, it was really important that we had a full spectrum plant, that you've got CBD, a tiny, tiny amount of THC just to make the CBD more effective, and then all the other awesome components in there, which make our product that much more effective.
Now, what's the story with your husband? How's he doing?
He's doing okay. It's a degenerative disease. He's certainly getting worse as time goes on, but his quality of life is remaining pretty steady thanks to CBD, thanks to a lot of his other supplements that he uses, like super high levels of fish oil for him is really helping his mental health while dealing with chronic pain. So he's doing okay. It's, every day is different with him. And it's going to be, a struggle for the rest of his life that he's going to be dealing with. But if we could make each day feel a little bit better, then I think I'm doing something right for him.
Well, can you believe it, Brooke? We're already to the end of our show. Like, I could probably talk to you for another couple hours, but those people that are listening know I'm not going to do it. You can find out. So if people want to find out more about you, where do they go to find out more about you, Brooke?
Sure. They can go to dailyhabitcbd.com, and it has my story and connections to all of my social media and anything you could possibly want to know about me.
And you said you're going to have a little gift for the Secrets of Success listeners, and what is that gift going to be?
Sure. We'd love to give everyone who listens, a big discount on any order. And so if you go into dailyhabitcbd.com and use the coupon code SECRETS with an S at the end, you'll get 25% off any of your order.
Well, thank you for that.
Of course.
Brooke, when I, as a wellness advocate, and sometimes my discipline isn't as good as it could be, and I have some chocolate chip cookies at 3 o'clock, what would you say as sort of closing comments to the listeners for them to really take their wellness to the next level, or at least address some of the things that you've talked about today, beyond what you've said already?
Beyond what I've said, I might have used it all up. I think that people need to know that wellness is not black and white, and that the truth is some days that chocolate chip cookie is part of your wellness program, and some days not going to the gym and instead spending an extra half an hour drinking coffee at home might be part of that. We can be so black and white where if we don't do it 100%, we're not going to do it at all. And I think that it's really important to remember that self-care is part of wellness, to go a little bit easier on ourselves, that every meal and every bite you take is another opportunity to make a healthier choice. And really just, treat your body well. And that could mean a lot of different things for different people. But, like a plant, we need good food, sunlight, and water. So treat yourself well.
Well, Brooke, stay on the line, but thank you very much for being on the show today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, SOS listeners, Secrets of Success listeners, your wellness and health matters, because you can only bring your best self when you are at your healthiest or optimum health that you can be at. And as Brooke said, hey, let's not get guilty about it. Let's not beat ourselves up and create more stress. But let's take some intentional, responsible steps to go forward to say, hey, how can I be better? So go look up Brooke's site, find out more about what she's doing and just all the different things that are there. But also for you, take responsibility. Maybe go and buy her book, The Sugar Detox, as a way to learn more about getting that out of your system and diet as well. Now, as always, thank you for listening. If you like what we're doing, please pass it on, leave a positive comment or rating on whatever platform you're listening on. Thank you for listening to Secrets of Success. I'm your host, Dr. Ken Keis.
Thanks for exploring the secrets of success with us. If you want to keep the momentum going, log on to crgleader.com. Scroll to the bottom and sign up for our inspirational emails. You can also take your success to the next level by following us on Facebook and Twitter and connecting with Ken on LinkedIn. We hope you have a great week and look forward to you joining us next time for the Secrets of Success podcast with Dr. Ken Keis.